Inspiration then. I think this is going to be a doozy from you. So we'll start with what's been your inspiration.
What has been my inspiration? Well, what has been my inspiration? I can categorically say it's my diagnosis of PMDD, because I think actually it's given me purpose. And when I think about PMDD and what it means to me, I do think about that 14-year-old girl walking on her own. And I can even picture, like, it was a really overcast, cloudy day. It was really dark. And I think the inspiration for me is making sure, or working towards, no one else feeling like that because of their hormones. Because it's something that, if I'd have known at the time that's what I was going through and there was a name for it and it wasn't my fault, everything would have been different. And it took me until the age of 28 to get diagnosed.
I was going to say, what's the time?
Yeah.
So for 14 years, basically, in the wilderness.
That's it. So it makes no sense why that happened. Like, there's no reason for that to happen. And so that for me is giving my condition a purpose, is my inspiration. And I think a lot of people do say, you know, your condition doesn't have to define you, and it doesn't. And if that's your mindset, that's absolutely fine, and you know, you do what works for you. For me, I have to take something so awful and make it better. I have to have a reason for it to happen, because otherwise what I do is I go, I've got this condition and I'm a victim, and I don't want to feel like that. And so I have to use it. It has to be purposeful for me. It has to make things better for somebody else. And if it does, I can kind of understand why I've got it. So I guess that is the what is the inspiration. PMDD actually is the inspiration. And I never thought I'd say that. And I know that there might be people who listen to this and go, PMDD, but I hate PMDD and I'd never ask for it. And I absolutely wouldn't. But I'm glad that I've been able to use it to help other people and as a catalyst for, you know, my business. And it has had its advantages. Even just saying that word doesn't feel right, because I would never usually say that, but actually I've learned to live more cyclically. So I know that in every stage of my menstrual cycle now, there are strengths and then there are watch outs, and particularly obviously in the later part of my cycle, that's a really tricky time. But I also know that when I'm near the start of my cycle, like, there's no stopping me, and that's something to really be celebrated. And if it wasn't for having PMDD, I wouldn't be able to really optimize those better days, because I wouldn't have the knowledge of them.
Yeah.
So in that sense, PMDD is the inspiration.
Yeah. And well, there is a lot of sort of coming now research about that, about, you know, you've got a creative phase and, you know, using that.
Yes.
And then there is a phase that you need to be more nurturing. And we do need to rest, don't we? And
Absolutely.
I think especially as busy women, we tend to just go.
Definitely.
And stop listening to our bodies and become disconnected. And think, certainly with modern life, that's what we've done, whereas perhaps in the old days everyone had to follow that cycle, didn't they?
That's right. And I think I always say, when people are trying to understand their menstrual cycle, like, think of yourself like a squirrel, because in the winter a squirrel will hibernate, they'll go inwards, they'll just, like, they won't want to do anything, they won't want to see anybody. And then in springtime they start thinking, like, oh, maybe actually I can come out of hibernation now, maybe I'll start getting myself out there again. And that's very much how I feel when my period's just coming to an end. I'm kind of like, oh, actually I feel quite good.
Yeah.
And then that peaks, and then I start thinking, right, it's time to go back into hibernation mode now. And that will be the time where I start almost like nesting again. And, you know, in a typical person who doesn't have PMDD, that in itself is a really wonderful time, because, like you say, it's a very nurturing time. It's when my creativity peaks, during my difficult days, actually. But the strength of that, you know, as a business owner, is during those days of my cycle when I know that that's really difficult for me, and it wouldn't be good for me to have clients or go on podcasts or anything like that, especially as well clients with PMDD. We wouldn't want, you know, we have to be mindful of triggering each other. But I can use those days actually when I'm feeling more creative to do things like my marketing and my social media and updating my website, so I can still be very, very purposeful in that time. And if that means that I'm sat in bed on my laptop and I've got like the TV on in the background and I'm not like the epiphany of productivity and efficiency, that's okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely fine. I'm doing what feels good for me in that phase of my cycle.
Yeah. Which is the joy, obviously, of you becoming self-employed, because
Absolutely.
you can choose to do that.
Yeah.
Because it must be really tough to feel like that and have to clock in and out every day.
Definitely. I wrote a blog on this recently that, you know, you go to work and then you come home again, and then you go to work and you come home again. But for me, I couldn't stay in a job that expected me to show up the same way every single day, when I know that I can't do that. My energy doesn't allow it. So for me, I used to work in corporate finance. To be consistent every single day didn't work for me. And that's not to say that, you know, because I have a menstrual cycle, I have a weakness. Actually, my strengths and my watch outs are just different at different times of the month. But obviously, if I'd have said that to my employer, and, you know, there's going to be some days when I, you know, just need to kind of not see clients and things like that, they probably wouldn't have been able to accommodate that. So it's really tricky. And what I always say is, if you can think of like cyclical living as an approach as opposed to something you have to go all in with, then just having that approach and being mindful of where you are in your cycle and what you might find trickier and what help you might need, that in itself is going to be really empowering.
So that brings us nicely on to how you want to inspire others, because it sounds like you've already done that to a great degree with your podcast and the community that you've gathered around you.
I think I just want everyone to know that whatever they're living with, because nobody really has perfect health, not forever, not in today's world. And I just want people to know that you can still live life on your terms with a condition like PMDD or with hormone havoc. You can still live life on your terms, not just in spite of these things, but they can help you to do that. And I think this is where my business mentoring has come in recently, because people say to me, I'd love to be self-employed, but I can't because I have bipolar disorder or I have fibromyalgia. And I'm kind of like, but you can. And so that is how I've kind of gone into business mentoring, because a lot of my clients are then going, well, I want to be self-employed. And so we've kind of gone down that route, and people have started coming to me now saying, well, actually, I have PMDD and I'm a business owner. So it's this very kind of small niche that I seem to be working with accidentally. But it's brilliant. And it's not to say you have to be self-employed if you have PMDD. It's about saying what's going to be the best thing for you, and if that's self-employment, brilliant. If it's the consistency of a job where you go to work, you get paid the same every month, you work the same hours, you know where you stand, brilliant. You know, it's really living life on your terms, not on the terms of what you think you should be doing. And letting people know that they do have those choices. I think I always thought that I had to work in corporate and do 9 to 5, and I had to like climb some ladder that I don't even know what that means. And it was only when I realised that I don't have to do it, that was so freeing. And it was like, oh, I can actually do work on my terms. That was a huge moment for me. So making sure other people know that's what I want to, that's the message I want to go across.
Yes, that's brilliant, because I think that's what's missing, is knowing we've got choices, especially as women, and especially as women entrepreneurs or starting a business. It's funny because I had a meeting with my financial advisor last week about, you know, annual review, and I was like, I consider myself a very risk averse person. He was like, what? He said, you've set up your own business, you set up another business, you're doing the podcast. I was like, oh, never really thought of it like that. And I think it's just people, if they meet other people who've got a different way of doing things, that is an inspiration, isn't it? That you don't have to go the traditional route.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%.
Spark then.